All right, so these are the notes for the SOHCAHTOA review for right triangle trigonometry. First thing, guys, you need to do in your calculator is follow these steps. Press the mode button, and you need to highlight degree instead of radian. So all of these problems need to be done in degree mode. So follow these few steps, hit the clear button to go back to the main screen. Pause as you need to in this video if I'm going too fast here. All right, but SOHCAHTOA, of course, is what we're going to use. So it's important to know, of course, sine is opposite divided by hypotenuse. You might want to put a fraction bar there. Cosine is the adjacent side divided by hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. Of course, sine, cosine, and tangent, those buttons can be found on your calculator. And then there's another acronym for SOHCAHTOA if you need help memorizing that familiar trig acronym. All right, so the first example, notice the directions. They want us to write the sine, cosine, and tangent of angle Q as a ratio or as a fraction. So I'm going to circle angle Q since this is the angle that we're discussing in this problem. And the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, I'm going to cover up that angle with your hand. And when you do that, you'll notice that 3 is opposite. So I'm going to put an O there next to the 3. 5 is considered the hypotenuse because when you cover up the right angle with your hand, you're not touching this side. So there's your O, there's your H, and 4 is your adjacent side. And that's not going to change for this problem because we're only talking about angle Q. So the first trig function is the sine of Q. So again, sine is O over H. And in this particular problem, O is 3 and H is 5. So the sine of Q is 3/5. And actually, in this case, if you type in the sine of 37 degrees in your calculator, it's going to give you a decimal that's really close to 3/5. So the sine of 37 is always going to be a decimal that's right around 3/5. Cosine of Q is A over H. So this time the adjacent side is 4 and the hypotenuse is 5. And then tangent, of course, is O over A. Of course, you've done all this last year in geometry, so this is just a refresher. O is 3 and A is 4. So most of the time, we're not going to write these trig functions as fractions, but this particular case, that's what they asked to do on this problem. So we're going to do 3 basic problems together to just kind of model and remind you how to do these. So this one we're going to solve for x. So 28 degrees is our reference angle. So remember, you cover up that angle with your hand, and the side you're not touching is x. So x is the O, or the opposite side. The hypotenuse is the longest side, the side that's opposite the right angle. So here's our hypotenuse. We're not using that in this problem because there's no number, no letter there. And then 32, of course, is our adjacent side. So we need to pick the trig function that uses O and A. Of course, that is the TOA of SOHCAHTOA. So the setup goes like this. We're just going to take the tangent of 28 degrees, and we're going to set it equal to the opposite side over the adjacent side. I always like to put the tangent of 28 over 1. A couple different ways to do this, but basically we're cross multiplying, just like we did with special right triangles. So when we cross multiply that way, we get 1x. When we cross multiply this way, we get 32. And it's important, you do want to write the 32 first. when you type this in the calculator. So x is going to equal 32 times the tangent of 28, and then you're simply going to punch that into the calculator. So again, tangent is right here, a couple of buttons above the 9, and we're going to type that in. And when you hit enter, you should get 17.01. If you're not getting that when you type it in, that means you're probably in radian mode still, so change your calculator. And typically, we're going to round everything to the nearest tenth. So x, in this case, to the nearest tenth is just going to be approximately 17 units. All right, so this next one, same idea. This time our angle is up here in the top right corner, 64 degrees. So cover up the 64-degree angle with your hand, and you'll see that 32 is the opposite side, and x is opposite the right angle, so it's the hypotenuse. This other side's the adjacent side, but we're not really going to use that because there's no number, no letter on the adjacent side. So I'm going to circle these two things because we've got a number, we've got a letter. So we're going to use the SO trig function, the sine trig function, because that's the trig function that uses O and H. It's basically the same setup. So we're going to take the sine and we're going to abbreviate that SIN. 64 degrees equals the opposite side over the hypotenuse. The setup is the same, but this time the variable's on the bottom. So we're basically going to have one extra step. Cross multiply that way, we get 32. And we cross multiply this way, we get x times the sine of 64 degrees. And to undo this multiplication symbol, because we're trying to solve for x, we're of course going to divide both sides by the sine of 64 degrees. So we're going to type in our calculator, 32 divided by the sine of 64. You can use alpha at y equals if you like. But when we type it in, that's what we get. Practice typing it in yourself. But you should get about 35.6. Again, rounded to the nearest tenth. Encourage you to pause it and try the last one on your own. So this last one, we've got 40 degrees. Cover it up. The opposite side is over here. We're not going to use the opposite side because there's no number, no letter on that side. 15 is opposite the right angle. So that means 15 is our hypotenuse, which means x has to be the adjacent side. So we've got a and h. So that is the Ka trig function. Or, of course, the cosine trig function. So we're going to take the cosine of 40 degrees, put it over 1, and set it equal to the a over h side. And then we cross multiply one more time. This one's easier because x is on the top. So x is going to equal 15 times the cosine of 40. So again, make sure you put the 15 first when you do it in the calculator. So when we type in 15 times the cosine of 40, we get about 11.5. All right, at this point, if you think you got it, you can go ahead and stop watching the video and then complete that back page on your own. If you need a little more help, I'm going to work out a couple more problems from the next page. So again, on these first four, we are writing the answers as fractions. And notice they change up the angle on each one. We're going to do 1 and 3. So number 1, they want us to find the sine of angle B. So I'm going to circle B. So sine, of course, is O over H. So I just need to figure out what the opposite side of angle B is and what the hypotenuse. So if you cover up angle B with your hand, the side you're not touching is 40. So 40 is the opposite side. Of course, the hypotenuse is the longest side, or the side opposite the right angle. So over H is 40 over 41. The thing I'm going to erase, because on number 3, and really 2, 3, and 4, the angle in question is angle A. So that's going to change what's opposite and what's hypotenuse. It's still sine, so we're still doing over H. And now we're focusing on angle A, which means 9 is the opposite side. The hypotenuse doesn't change. Hypotenuse is always the longest side. Side opposite the right angle, so hypotenuse is still 41. So the sine of angle A is 9 over 41. So 2 and 4, you're still using angle A. A couple more of these. So number 5. So number 5, 28 degrees is our angle. Cover up the angle. The side you're not touching is X, so X is your opposite side. Our hypotenuse is the longest side, the side opposite the right angle, so it's this side over here. We don't really need the hypotenuse because there's no number, no variable there. So that means 32 is the adjacent side. So I'm going to circle adjacent, and I'm going to circle opposite. That's O and A. So that tells me that's the tangent trig function. So we're going to take the tangent of 28 degrees and set it equal to X over 32. And of course, just cross multiply to get your answer. A little bit easier when X is on the top. So the last one we'll do where X is on the bottom. So type in 32 times the tangent of 28. We get 17.01. I'm pretty sure that was the first example we did in class. That's okay. All right, then finally number 8. So let's finish with this one. So 64 degrees is the given angle. That side down here is the opposite side, so we're not going to use O. X is the longest side, so it's our hypotenuse. And 15 is our adjacent side. Mark that out, we don't need it. A and H. So that's the cosine of 64 degrees equals 15 divided by X. So again, X is on the bottom. So basically there's just an added step when X is on the bottom, because when we cross multiply here, we get X times the cosine of 64. Can't really multiply those two things together. We cross multiply here, we get 15. Undo that multiplication with division. And then type in 15 divided by the cosine of 64, and we're done. So 34.2.